Estonian Prime Minister Kristen Michal, at a press conference on the 12th of March 2026, declared that his country was under threat. A Russian-controlled influence campaign had recently focused on the northeastern city of Narva and was actively trying to sow confusion and create division. That same day, a spokesperson for Estonia's security service said the group, known as the Narva People's Republic, was trying to break up social cohesion and added that this is a provocation and participating in it may lead to criminal consequences. A few days later, the German tabloid Bild ran a story about the Narva People's Republic with the headline, "Is Putin preparing an attack on Estonia?" A few days after that, Euronews published an article in which a security expert named Carlo Massala claimed the online group was part of a psychological warfare campaign. It all sounds terrifying, and the group is certainly engaged in provocative behavior. Besides modeling its name on the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics, both part of Russia's 2014 invasion of Ukraine, its content displayed the slogan, "We are waiting for Russia." But when I looked at the rest of the content being posted by the Narva People's Republic, what I mostly noticed was cat memes. And I'll be honest, not especially slick or creative cat memes. This didn't make sense to me, so I decided to contact the Narva People's Republic directly, and they agreed to talk to me. And I asked them, "Are you agents of Moscow?" The answer I got was, if we were truly a Kremlin project, we wouldn't be producing such amateurish, cheap, and low-quality content as we are now. It's a fair point, but then maybe that's what Russian agents would want you to think. Is Estonia's Prime Minister right that his society is under threat from these memes? And what else did I talk about with the so-called psychological warfare unit known as the Narva People's Republic? Stay tuned. I'll explain. Hi everyone, my name's Fredo Rockwell, and I honestly wasn't expecting to make a video this week about Estonia, but then in my last video about Kazakhstan, someone left this comment, and I was so intrigued I just had to investigate. Let me just say that the background to this story, Russia's persistent and ongoing threat to Estonia's national security, is a very real issue. While I was researching this video, in fact, a Russian Su-30 fighter aircraft violated Estonian airspace, triggering NATO defenses. The incursion only lasted for a minute, but this is something Russia does regularly to intimidate the Estonian people. On this count, Russia has totally failed. The Estonian people are not intimidated, but they're obviously a bit sensitive to the idea of online groups calling for Russia to invade. That being said, I'm a bit skeptical that the Narva People's Republic, as has been asserted by numerous Estonian officials and the wider European media, is part of a coordinated campaign orchestrated by the Kremlin. I may be wrong, and there certainly could be intelligence that I don't have access to. But to me, this looks like a very bad reading of the situation by Estonia's leader and the journalists who have reported on it. I'll explain why in a moment, but first, let's examine why would a group of people claiming to be ethnic Russians from Estonia plausibly want to make a play for political control in the city of Narva? When Estonia re-established its independence in 1991, after 47 years of Soviet occupation, the situation in Narva was complicated. Narva was completely destroyed during World War II and then rebuilt by the Soviet occupiers, but the previous ethnic Estonian residents were not allowed to return. Instead, citizens from other parts of the Soviet Union, mostly ethnic Russians, were shipped in. For this reason, Narva remains a majority Russian city today, and back in 1991, the newly freed Estonian government worried that ethnic Russians in general, and especially in Narva, right on the border with Russia, were a potential source of instability, or maybe something far worse. Along with Latvia, Estonia introduced laws that restricted the rights of ethnic Russian, quote, settlers and their descendants. These people were denied citizenship until they passed Estonian history and language tests, and 125,000 people either refused or were unable to comply with the new rules, possibly because Estonian is one of the most difficult languages to learn in the world. This effectively rendered much of Narva's population stateless, unable to vote or hold office. And just to make their status really clear, they were issued special non-citizen alien passports. Understandably, being labeled second-class citizens, quite literally, led to discontent in Narva. There was talk in the early 90s of a breakaway state called Transnarovia. There was also an unofficial referendum on turning Narva into an autonomous region. The referendum passed, but was ruled illegal. Over time, though, tensions eased, and soon a law was passed that gave anyone born after 1992, whatever language they spoke, the right to Estonian nationality. But then, in 2014, Russia seized Crimea, and 2 independent People's Republics were declared in Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine, and suddenly, having territory with a Russian-speaking majority inside your country became a serious potential national security threat. So this is the context for these recent events. Russia's military is constantly trolling the Estonian people about a possible invasion, and 12 years ago, the declaration of the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics was part of Russia's invasion into Ukraine. So yeah, I get why a group calling itself the Narva People's Republic would make people in Estonia freak out. Just because freaking out is an understandable reaction, though, that doesn't mean it's the best reaction. Let's have a look for a moment at exactly what this organization has actually done. The movement behind the Narva People's Republic, so far at least, appears to exist only online, with a series of channels on Telegram, of a Kontakte page, and channels on TikTok and YouTube. These accounts were created many months ago, but started posting content in February 2026. Most of the content published that first month is either memes, like this one about the use of the Russian language being discouraged in Estonia, or images of military units with Narva People's Republic symbols photoshopped onto them. There are posts which show the Narva People's Republic as a distinct political entity, separate from both Estonia and Russia, and some of the language and imagery is certainly provocative, but, and I don't mean this critically, it's not especially sophisticated. During that first month, there was also not much in the way of specific demands, or any sign of real-life action being taken, except this post here, which shows a pro-Narva flyer, which is supposedly being posted in apartment building stairwells. As someone who spends a lot of time researching separatist groups online, let me reassure you that the internet, and Telegram in particular, is full of groups just like this. In fact, I've had conversations with dozens of people from separatist groups inside Russia, as in groups that want to secede from Russia, that produce content which is nearly identical to this. And I'm 100% sure that none of those people are in groups which are part of a CIA or Washington orchestrated psychological warfare campaign. They're usually just normal people, often young people, who feel extremely frustrated and upset with the political situation they find themselves in. For the first month, the Narva People's Republic got hardly any attention, with 10 to 20 subscribers. But then an anti-propaganda website called Propostop published a blog post that covered what the group was doing. The post is carefully worded and avoids drawing conclusions not supported by data. It also says, based on publicly available information, it is currently not possible to determine who is behind these accounts or what the organizational background of the project may be. It did warn, though, that the Narva People's Republic was normalizing narratives about the separation of Estonian territory and separatism. All in all, an assessment that is, in my opinion, pretty measured. The government officials who responded to the Propostop story and the professional journalists who reported on those responses were, however, anything but measured. I've already covered in the opening what the statements by the Prime Minister and the Estonian security services were. What I find really odd is that both of these statements state unequivocally that this group is being controlled by Russia. Do they have some sort of intelligence to prove this? If they do, they didn't say that they did, and they don't give any other evidence to back up their claims. It looks to me like they just assumed that these were Kremlin cat memes. And then the media seems to have accepted these assertions unquestioningly. The Russian language version of an article by Euronews even refers to the group as Moscow's online propaganda campaign. So let's get back to my conversation with the so-called Kremlin-backed separatists. Here's what happened. Like many Telegram channels, the main Narva People's Republic channel has a bot you can use to contact the channel admins. I did this, introducing myself in my YouTube channel, and asked if I could ask someone a few questions. A few hours later, I got a reply, Здравствуйте, which in Russian means hello. Okay, so right away, the fact that these guys responded to me at all is pretty strong evidence that they are not Russian agents. When I've contacted separatists in the past who are genuine Russian agents, they don't talk to me. Sometimes I get blocked, and the former foreign minister of the Luhansk People's Republic, Vladislav Denega, told me to go do something to myself that's anatomically impossible. Also, a sophisticated Kremlin-backed group would be crazy to talk to me. The video I had published just days before this conversation was about a separatist group of ethnic Russians in Kazakhstan, which I called the world's dumbest separatist movement. They had absolutely no reason to believe that I would be sympathetic to their cause at all. And just in case anyone has any doubts about this, I absolutely do not sympathize with any group calling for Russia to invade Estonia or any other country. At the same time, I'm interested in the truth, so I started asking questions. After telling me their names, Bellamore, Camel, and Marlboro, all brands of cigarettes, the Narva People's Republic representatives told me, without me even asking, we do not advocate for Narva's independence from Estonia. Rather, we seek autonomy within Estonia. The earliest content on the Telegram channel does heavily indicate the group seeks independence for Narva and includes plans for Narva to have its own military, but to be fair, when the group does lay out specifics for its goals, which it does starting on March 7th, several days before the Propostop article and the Prime Minister's intervention, they do clearly state that their top priority is autonomy, not independence. Using the slogan, "We are waiting for Russia," is not consistent with the Narva People's Republic's claim that they are only interested in autonomy. But I think this may have been trolling. Very, very badly judged trolling. I asked Bellamore to elaborate on what they mean by autonomy. He responded, "Our strategy is the creation of a robust civil society, one possessing a shared self-identity and defending its interest through legal means." I followed up with a fairly obvious question. If you're interested in autonomy gained through legal, presumably peaceful political means, why use imagery that implies a violent revolution or model your identity on the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics? They replied, "The goal was to generate media interest in us. You have to admit that you would have noticed us much later, and certainly not as widely as you have now, had we simply published boring posts about Estonian domestic politics and engaged in endless chatter. We needed to shock the public, and to a certain extent, we succeeded." I can't disagree that the shock value of their content did indeed spark a media frenzy, but I find it hard to believe that any of this was planned. My impression is that the organizers of this group were caught off guard by the amount of attention that they've received. If I'm right, that means they really can't be, as Carlo Massala asserted, a Kremlin-backed psychological warfare campaign. And to me, pressing for autonomy rather than independence is more evidence that this is not a Kremlin-backed campaign. If they were really interested in dividing society, as Prime Minister Miha claimed, they would ramp up the separatist rhetoric and imagery as they gained media attention, not just defensively insist that all they wanted was autonomy. I asked Bellamore if he would acknowledge that having an autonomous ethnic Russian political entity on the Russian border was a potential security threat. As an example of what I mean, I brought up how a Russian oligarch is currently undermining the political system in Moldova by influencing the Russian-speaking autonomous region of Gagauzia. I assumed he would deny this as a potential concern. But to my surprise, he didn't. He said, "Yes, but unfortunately, how else? If they are not prepared to grant autonomy, then the Estonian government must completely overhaul its system for integrating Russian speakers and abandon the so-called gray passports." I asked Bellamore if he had a gray passport. These are the non-citizen alien passports I mentioned before. He said, "No comment." Bellamore may not actually be from Estonia, and if he is, he may not have been born before 1992, but there are still an estimated 62,000 stateless ethnic Russians in Estonia today, and I can see how this would lead to upset and resentment. Now, I don't actually know where any of the people that I was texting with were from, or where they were when we were speaking. I was told most members of the Narva People's Republic were ethnic Russians from Narva, but others were from mainland Russia, while others were from other countries. There's no way to know, but it's my guess that this is a group of mostly ethnic Russians with some sort of connection to Narva, even if it's only an awareness of some of the difficulties that ethnic Russians face in that city. And they wanted to do something edgy, which they thought would counter what they perceived to be injustices against the ethnic Russians who live there, the gray passports being a prime example. Are there criticisms of the Estonian state and Estonian society in general based on legitimate grievances? To a degree, yes. Thousands of ethnic Russians in Estonia have been made effectively stateless by their own country, and this is a clear violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which Estonia signed just after independence in 1993. At the same time, it would be wrong to say that the relations between ethnic Russians and the rest of Estonian society are in some sort of terrible state at the moment. According to what I read in a follow-up article on the Delphi website, when a journalist spoke to Narva residents about the Narva People's Republic, most thought the idea was ridiculous. And this doesn't surprise me, because I'm pretty sure integration between Russians and Estonians has improved dramatically over the decades. Also, it's not Estonia's fault that enclaves of ethnic Russians are a security threat to countries all around the region. By defining all Russian speakers as part of the Ruski Mir, the Russian world, and by claiming to be their protector, and by occupying Russian-speaking regions of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin is actually encouraging governments to treat Russian speakers with suspicion. Far from protecting ethnic Russians, Putin is just making them targets for discrimination. And how about Belomor, Camel, Marlborough, and the other members of the Narva People's Republic? What should happen to them? In all honesty, I think they've acted very stupidly, and they've triggered a lot of unnecessary anxiety and worry in Estonians across the country. But to be honest, the real sources of unnecessary anxiety and worry in this story are the overreactions of the Estonian Prime Minister and the Estonian Security Service, as well as the irresponsible reporting conducted by journalists who have covered this story. Ultimately, yes, it's the disgruntled online anonymous trolls who are truly at fault, but we don't really expect any better from these people. We should expect better from our elected officials, civil servants, and journalists. Thanks for watching. If you've watched this far, please go ahead and give the video a like. Also, I recently passed 25,000 subscribers, which is a big deal for me. So if you're one of those subscribers, thank you very much. And I'll see you guys in the next video.